You know, what started as mud in the bottom of a basket to carry water has slowly but surely evolved into a fine art medium. Welcome to AMOCA, American Museum of Ceramic Art. My name is Lance Hendrickson. I have another profession, but I'm also a compulsive potter. What you're about to see is a collaboration between Frank Boyden and Tom Coleman. It's taken 2 years and God knows how many hours. What I'm surrounded by is not an exhibit, it's an event. You start young and then you get really good. Pottery is really the art of the dignity of labor, and it's also the pursuit of the adventure. It isn't about making a bowl and saying, success, this is the end. I've reached it, I've done it. And I'm gonna make 10,000 more of them because everybody will appreciate them. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the pursuit.
I think as our society moves quicker, as it becomes more globalized, as we're more reliant on the internet and other electronic devices, there's still people in this world that want to have a connection, people to people. And I think pottery has that ability to communicate some of those more human elements.
In the field of art, the achievements tend to be singular. We tend to single out individuals rather than a group of people in attributing great artworks. Yet, Tom Coleman and Frank Boyden have come together to produce some ceramic art that is beyond the individual talents of either.
And it only stands to reason they would do that. It's not odd that they would do this. It's a very cohesive situation. Both have their own strengths, and they put these two strengths together and they come up with this third object, which is, I think it's going to be dynamite. I haven't seen it yet, but I think it's going to be dynamite. I can't wait to see it.
I think it's probably a lot less likely that collaboration could have developed if it had not been for wood firing, because the process to begin with has to be collaborative because it's more than one person can do alone.
Wood firing is always essentially collaborative.
When you're wood firing, you're working with other people, so the firing is a collaborative effort. That's why like Frank and Tom can do this, because they have done this kind of firing before and it's in them to work in a collaborative way.
Most people our age are playing golf, and they're probably way smarter than we are. I mean, this is insane. I mean, at 67, 68 years old, why are we out splitting wood, staying up all night, hoping that we get one really, really good piece out of it? Because it fills our soul, it fills our spirit.
The history of European ceramics has been how to protect the work from the fire. They went, and in China they did too, they went to great extremes to put pots down inside containers to protect them from the fire. And here we are wanting, our pieces depend on exposure to fire to deliver some kind of life to them that we can't deliver without the fire.
I get it. Looking good, all right?
I still, even though a lot of the pieces are asymmetric in the end, I still believe that you have to start off with a substantial form. You know, a form that's not perfect but has a nice balance to it, and then you can come in and push it around.
Tom, he can sit down and make that porcelain do things that most people have no idea how to make move the way he moves. And that sense of spirit and energy in the work comes across from years and years of training of making perfectly round pots. You can't go out around without being round first.
He's one of the top porcelain people in the country, there's no question about it.
All this is like a tongue and groove method of putting two pieces together, just like you do wood. So the next piece that I'll work, you turn upside down, it'll fit into that groove. Hey, it fit.
Tom Coleman is a master of the wheel.
You know, he's a technical master.
Tom is a master.
You know, the word used that I really hate, I don't hate it, it's just misused, is master potter. You know what master means? All-knowing. And when you know all about clay, everything there is to know, you get out, you quit, you're done.
You know, Frank will draw on request. If you like any kind of cartoon characters like Popeye or Olive Oil, he could draw that on the side for you. That's the all-around artist, right?
That's right.
I think Frank is one of the great designers of the surface of vessels.
I mean, he can cast bronze, he can make large sculptures, he can do pottery. He and I are much alike in this respect, that neither one of us have ever drawn a line between art and craft. You know, that this never came into we don't even think about that, you know. When somebody's making dishes, that's different, then we think about that. But if you're doing pottery, which is basically poetry, you know, that we don't care whether you call it sculpture, you call it pottery, it doesn't make any difference what you call it, you know.
You know, people consider porcelain to be such precious material, you know, and it should be treated just really gently and really softly and everything, but yet, you know, when you attack these things with these tools and things and you score into it and there's something really violent going on, you really set up a lot of tension between what people think something should be and what it actually is.
You mentioned porcelain, they either say, well, yeah, my bathtub's porcelain or my sink's porcelain, which is not true.
Right.
Or blue and white ware that you're, you know,
Well, I had a little porcelain doll head when I was a kid.
Yeah, a little doll head.
There's a full integration of surface treatment and form. A lot of his forms are very classical in nature, well balanced, albeit, you know, he manipulates and pushes and pulls the surface.
If we set this pot up in the kiln, close to the front, we could produce a carbon shade across half of it. So the skeletons would be half in darkness and half in white porcelain, okay?
I think he's a top firer. They're top fire, really good. He's been doing wood firing longer than anybody else that I know in the States, actually.
The flame really bullies, you know, the drawings on the pieces.
So he understands that properties of wood and the kilns and the kilns construction, and he understands the clay, he understands how to, you know, put color on the clay from the wood. I mean, what clays will take certain woods and how he can flash pots are just remarkable.
Frank Boyden and I built the 5th wood fire kiln in the United States in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And we were so proud of this. It took us a year and over $100,000 to build this kiln. And we had borrowed money. When we got these pieces out, we went around to all our galleries. We were so proud, and we'd show these things, and they would look at them like we had crapped on their floor. It was the nasty. Look what we've done. And they're looking at this, you know, they've cut their hands holding it. We were so proud. It's the process. And they would look up at me and they'd say, well, do you have any more decorated porcelain pieces? We'll have one of these.
Yeah, that was really awkward for me, you know.
Well, me too. I didn't know what the hell to.
But we had this stoneware and we made these big pieces.
They both recognized the potential.
What about the first meeting when you guys first discussed collaborating?
We were up at East Creek, you know, and we loaded a kiln and we just started to talk about. And I said, you know, it'd really be fun to draw on some of your pots.
From there, they have worked on and off together for years, each understanding the other's talents and each understanding that the other had something significant to add to the artwork.
Coleman was bringing these unbelievable thrown pieces. I mean, I just saw early on these really luscious surfaces. I mean, just see these beautiful forms that I couldn't throw.
Most people, when we make something, we have a kind of territorial feeling about it.
No, I always admired what he was doing. I thought, man, like he was saying, he'd like to draw on some of my pieces, some of the platters that you'd pushed out. That was my first thing that I really got off on. I couldn't figure out how he'd pushed them out. It was something I couldn't do with the porcelain.
When you conspire, two artists conspire together, and I mean that in the best sense of the word, you surrender. Because in order to work with another very strong mind, a very strong ego, and a very strong artistic bent of some kind, you have to surrender. There's no leader and follower.
For somebody to make a mark on something that somebody else has made takes an incredible amount of confidence and respect, and also a willingness to believe that someone else has something to deliver to that piece so that it can be a true collaboration.
It was kind of like I say to Tom, if you do this, I'm going to dork him around. Okay, go for it. That's all right. It's okay. I mean, wasn't that right? Kind of the way that was?
And that's what I'm doing myself on a lot of my own pieces. It's through, we've sort of crossed over.
I saw Tom throw these things, so much work, and so I was really uptight about that. But then I just realized that I couldn't feel that way. I couldn't. It just had to be like, he just hadn't spent all that time. He was just giving me this present to do with whatever I wanted on it, and then it worked,
It's got quite a bit down there, but I don't know.
We put more on there? Hell, let's take a little more.
Once he realized I wasn't uptight about that, and he wasn't uptight about certain things, we could talk to you. It's really hard to, we asked each other because we were so unsure. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? Is that going to work? And we still do it.
Tom, are you going to pull that right into a little tiny hole?
Yeah.
You're going to leave that sticking up like
I was going to leave it sticking up a little bit, coming in like that.
Yeah, I
only
kinda
narrow. I like
that.
it. It's very nice. I did it,
Yeah, we were talking like that all the time. I mean, I make him, what do you think? What do you think? What?
Oh, that's attractive.
I'd be no, Frank.
It's a kind of marriage.
Get the torch.
Oh, is it sinking there? Uh-oh.
Just go ahead and do it.
Right.
It involves a lot of trust.
I'm just talking about this thing. I can't see it while I'm doing it. So.
That's all right. That's okay.
You okay?
Yeah. One of the important factors is a kind of sympathy for the work that the other person does.
Hey, that's coming out all right, Frank.
We'll just lock these things together. What do you think?
I think it'd be beautiful. It's a hard form. Anyway, I didn't do that to torture you, but
Yes.
I mean, you have to really value what the other person does. And I think that's the fundamental basis of a good collaboration.
you're going to have to do something in the middle of this because I could not get this thing on perfect. It's just got a little bit of thing there and I can't get it out.
No, I'll draw right through it.
One of the things that made this collaborative effort work is that these two artists trust each other. There's one missing, Frank.
Yeah. There's the piece over there. You hit it, you scumbag. Here it is. No, this one right there. So bad.
The artist over.
Yeah, check this out. That's one of the greatest wood fire pieces that I have ever gotten out of a kiln. It was just fired a few weeks ago. It's a very, very subtle piece. You almost never get anything like this out of a wood kiln. I know I certainly haven't. And we're just incredibly subtle sorts of things that are going on here with this beautiful carbon infiltration into the surfaces, and whites and grays, burned out areas, really lovely subtle blushes, tiny bits of color here and there. But
neither Tom nor my dad make provocative art. Very rarely do you see them make something which is provocative. And in contrast to that, I would say that it's evocative. You don't look at them and get shocked. You don't go, or you don't think about some sort of big political statement. There've really not been artists which have pursued that. And much of our current dialogue about art and, you know, what its function is tends to be about, the focus tends to be on provocative material. It's very easy to write and talk about things which are provocative. That it comes, our whole language, if you look at our language, it's really built up about discussing things which are provocative.
I think that the art world is driven by glibness. We could wax eloquent about a lot of things, but we might not really be cutting into the really meat of the object or the subject or the human being or whatever that might be, or the pot or the print or the drawing, and just use words as a substitute for, you know, for the mystery of the art or the scene.
There's nothing wrong with conceptual art. There's nothing wrong with conceptual, craft ideas. But it just seems like the less you think about something like that, the more natural it is. I remember in art school that was always a thing when the big critique day came. You had to sit there and talk about your piece. And I'm thinking, my dad back in the '60s and '70s wasn't having to go through this rigmarole of like explaining what the piece meant and all this.
There's also another side of our language which exists to talk about evocative experience.
This just isn't a river, but it's, I don't know what it is. You see the light on it, you see the reflections, you see all the color that's going on out there, and you're able to take that and you're able to put it through some sort of a sieve that allows you to treat it in a different way, or to see it in a different way, or to put it across to somebody else in a different way.
The way this stuff's eroded, it's just like 3 worlds or 4, 5 different worlds. You've got a young person over here that's pretty strong, and then you've got the old person that the skin's starting to sag or wet cement or whatever, I don't know.
Each one of us has to learn how a given object can transport us from where we're sitting and whatever our thoughts are at a given moment, and transport us into another space.
People look at my work and I can tell in their face, if they're going, oh, this really has something to it that this is a part of my life too. I really appreciate this.
Both Tom and my dad, I think, are producing objects which their end function in a lot of ways is about inducing reverie, not about inducing a set of thoughts about a current political situation or a current, something that's happening within pop culture, or addressing a current, trend or question in the art world, but allowing for personal experience.
Maybe you just fill it up with
all the way
skeletons.
around, yeah.
Just a great big dance of them.
Be nice, yeah.
Let's do it.
Why is that a powerful statement? What is that going to do? That's a personal experience. Each one of us is capable of reverie. It's one of the fundamental parts of human experiences, our ability to sit in front of a candle or in front of a flower or in front of a beautiful cloud and kind of enter into this dream space, whatever that is.
A lot of potters, around the time that they're middle-aged, are really coming into their own. They've mastered the labor part. They've mastered all of the ingredients that they've decided on. So what happens as the work continues and you start having experience in it, you narrow down and narrow down and narrow down your field of adventure or your endeavor. There are so many choices today that people can't make any. They wander around like they're in a pinball machine, bouncing from one concept to the other, but don't make a choice.
Yeah, bring it into a,
okay.
like a...
And in pottery, it demands of you that you make choices.
I don't think you can do it all,
because there are so many different aspects involved with clay. You know, there's high fire, low fire, crystal, wood fire. You know, you have to really kind of concentrate on just a couple of them.
With all of these choices and the inevitability of the finale of our careers, which I think for most potters only comes when you finally, like a wet coat, fall off a hanger and become dead. You're working right up to that last moment. So working has those stakes in it. And most of the potters that I love and see their work, that's what I see in their work. I can tell it from across the room.
Was there one single moment, it may not be realistic, but was there one single moment when you're just like, this is working?
It was never like
No, I don't think there was any epiphany or anything like that, you know. There were some very cool things that happened.
One of their collaborative pieces ended up in the Smithsonian Institution, in the museum. And that is a significant achievement.
Kind of encouraged us. I mean, I think for me that was like, wow, that's very cool. You know, here's.
It was like someone saying,
there's
hey,
something.
it's working.
Yeah.
You know.
It was just like, you know, kind of somebody said, yeah, no, you guys really pushed the limits of something, and you know, thanks. You know, good on you.
I think ceramics is by far the most difficult, most complicated art medium available to us today. Once you have made your mark, then you have to cure it, you have to run it through the test of fire, you have all sorts of things that must be done to before the piece is finished. And then when it finally comes out of the kiln and it's not cracked and it hasn't warped or slumped, then you can really be proud of what you've accomplished.
I'm really apprehensive a little bit about these big porcelain things because we've never done big porcelain.
No.
It's always been stoneware clays or something that was more, but it's going to be different because I don't think anyone's made wood-fired porcelain pieces that big. I haven't seen them.
No, I've never seen one.
So this will be kind of another thing for us. If this doesn't work, we'll make it work.
They grew up in the same area, up outside of Portland, Oregon. Tom had to move to Henderson, Nevada. Frank, on the other hand, stayed in Oregon and lives where the Salmon River empties out into the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, those big Three Rocks out there, that's what the road is named for, Three Rocks Road. And sometimes in the winter we get these big storms, big waves roll in. You see green water over the top of those stones out there.
His home overlooks the estuary, and every day Frank sees all of these animals.
Snake? Oh yeah, it's my pet snake. Yeah, they're absolutely fantastic. Big garter snakes. Check him out.
Yeah, pick him up.
It's Coleman. These things can literally crawl right up. I've seen them crawl right up the side of this thing. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Well, this one's rattler's missing.
Yeah, right, that's right. Well, and I defanged it the other day too, so you don't have to worry about it.
In the case of Frank, you know, he's in such a unique environment on the coast of Oregon and is an avid environmentalist and really knows the wildlife and flora and fauna around him.
But I love to come and sit and just walk in these eel beds really slow too. They provide habitat for all sorts of other small fish.
That's part of his work. I feel like there's no separation between art and life, and I think that's, you know, a primary goal a lot of artists have, where they close that gap between the day-to-day experience and what they're communicating with their work.
You know, we have huge runs of salmon in this river, and you know, one of my really favorite things is, you know, kind of after that run is over and the fish have spawned and, you know, they die, and the river's full of carcasses and these wonderful, fantastic bone structures that are there, and, you know, on the gravel and in the river, and then if there's for instance, like a big flood or something like that, these carcasses are, you know, they get hung up in trees and hanging out of trees and in bushes. I mean, it's just a miracle. Beautiful, beautiful linear structures of these bones. And it's something that I've used for a really, really a long time. And you know, there's a lot of bone structures in my drawing on ceramics.
When you get a guy like Frank Boyden, you have this poetry going on in there that he can't help himself about. It has to do with where he lives. We've gone from a place where the only ingredients that you can find are around where you live to a place where all the ingredients are available from anywhere. I can get stuff from South Africa, I can get it from England or wherever. But the one thing in my environment that he has, he's living at the mouth of a river by the ocean, and he loves the fish and the birds and I mean, this is a giant influence.
Oh, here, see the deer? See it right there? They're just coming down the hill there.
He's one of the most interesting people I ever met. He's very intelligent, a great artist, and he lives the life of just anyone that you'd be around.
Salmon.
In Frank's portrayal of the wildlife in the estuary of the Salmon River, it's an artist's vision of what he has seen, and in a way, he is preserving the happenings there in that estuary in a way that no camera could ever do.
For a father, I have someone who is an observer, this extremely acute observer of natural phenomena. And the way that he has processed that in terms of his, professional life is to take those and try to articulate them in a static object, right?
I think, that good artists are, people who just see things in different ways and who take the time to try to perceive their world in different ways. They lived in these trees all the time.
There's such spiritual places for me around, and for me to say this, people always go, "Oh, you're about as spiritual as a Chevrolet." But it's true. I'm not a real spiritual person, but I believe in something. And boy, it hits you because no one could have made everything around there not be a purpose to all this.
He has a very clear vision of his life, very clear. It's very attractive, and it's very safe. He can be very open because he can answer you about his life. He's a master potter. That's what he is. There's nothing more to say than that. You know, if you been able to enter his domain, you would know it.
I never fit into anything, to tell you the truth. And this sounds like, I always had short hair when long hair was in. I had curly hair when the Beatles were around. I couldn't do that. And even in art school, God, I had a hard time because I came out of the Army. I was just super straight, and I really wasn't that good of an artist. It took me years to realize that I'd actually made it enough to where I felt comfortable with what I was doing in life. And that was a tough part for me. I don't regret it because all those parts just make you stronger. And my friends now are potters, and I love these people. They're my family, truly.
I think it's gained him a lot of friends, actually. Being laid back and being, a little bit more welcoming. I think people, I don't want to say uptight, but people that are really, they want to achieve, X amount of things before they die. They really, the pace is picked up. It seems like, a lot of those type of people have an agenda, and it's kind of hard to get to, they're more formidable. My dad, you could feel like you could just approach him right off the bat, It's a lesson to be learned, actually.
Tom energized our field in the last 10 or 15 years when we needed something. Coming out of the 60s and 70s, he's had a real direction in terms of developing gestural type forms that have a lot of spirit, animation, and qualities about movement that have taken the whole sort of spotty brown pot to a whole nother level.
I went into the Freer Museum, and I was so excited to see all these old Asian pieces. A lot of them had washed ashore on a ship as ballast. And the old ships come in 1800s, and they'd throw these Chinese pots, beautiful blue and white pots, but in the process the lids had been broken off, the handles had been broken. And I got to where I liked this broken handle much more than I would this elaborate thing. And that's where this is. It's sort of like the finish to a piece, but yet it's a broken handle.
He's known for those aqua blue kind of barium tinted glazes and the pastel colors and the airbrush washes across surfaces. That type of imagery is developed by Tom. He's known for that.
He also has this fantastic floatability with slip trailing.
Tom kind of lit a fire under what form and surface can do to everyday pottery. So that kind of thing he is well known for, and our field is very grateful for him for leading the charge, so to speak, in that direction.
Wow. Look at these flame patterns and stuff. Moving from Oregon to the desert, of course, really kind of changed my approach to the pieces, not the way they were done.
After he moved to Nevada, I noticed, a shift in his color palette, a shift in his form. The colors became, sort of reflected a desert environment. Some very vivid colors and some very muted. So it was a marked shift with his earlier work.
I look more at desert things, and I think I really associate more with those than I did the Northwest. I think I started associating much more with that, with ideas and forms and shapes. And I think it was just more me than at any place I've ever been. I feel very minuscule out here. When I tell people to get out and take photographs of nature or something that's happening outside of the realm of what they're doing, I'm talking about getting this close to something. And then it all becomes something they can relate to a little bit more, instead of just taking the landscape photograph with the cow in the background or something. When you bring that all up close, to me, that's when it starts making sense, when all the textures, the colors, and that's the nice thing about a camera with a with a macro lens on it, it just fills this whole frame, and it becomes a clay wall, a painting, texture for anything. Elaine and I have made our living at this, actually, at this and almost nothing else, except for a few odd teaching jobs. I have stuck with this either out of naivety, stupidity, or just drive, and I think it's drive now. Everything that Elaine and I have done has been on such a level of difficulty that no one really wanted to mess with it. People will try carving for a while. You'll see them do it for maybe 6 months. There is so much loss involved in this, and it's so time consuming that people just give it up.
My dad's always plowed through it. My mom's always plowed through it as far as keeping an eye on the prize and working.
People used to say, well, how stupid is this if you can't, you keep unloading this thing and it's no good. I'd built a new kiln. I couldn't figure out how to fire it. I just keep plodding along, and a lot of those old concepts I got from the Japanese tradition are still there, and they're mixed in with my ideas. I'm happy. No telling where I'll go. I changed.
He worked through a series of ideas, and that's the way it should be. Then that'll lead him to something else,
Now I'm on to another little thing. And once it's just that little plateau, once one little thing excites you, now I'm taking these round pieces and I'm getting a rib that's huge, and I'm pushing it, distorting it so much that it just becomes almost like a pregnant woman, a rock, or an S. And I'm getting excited. I have never fired one yet. Or coming up with a glaze. I can do a glaze test, and with that one little test out of the kiln, a whole movement happens. I say, oh boy, now I've got this. And now I can do that shape that I wanted to do, and it will enhance, the glaze will make this whole thing work. And that's the way I work. I plod along.
He's a master of conceiving a glaze based on the materials, the raw materials, and he can actually visualize a glaze in his mind by saying, if I add this with that and I add that, I think the outcome is going to be this.
And he's willing to share all that knowledge. He'll share. You just have to ask him. And that is very unusual for a lot of people who, when you're calculating a glaze and you're working with this and you got a bushel basket full of glaze tests, a lot of people just don't want to share that. See, Tom shared, he's from our school, I guess, I love him very, very much. Good guy, good guy.
We got 2 beds.
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping with you again.
We tested each other last night. The snoring and all that didn't bother me.
Hey, we used to go on to stay together in Seacrest, us 3.
Yeah.
And if you didn't beat him to bed, you get to sleep because he snores like bears on fire. It's called a train kiln. They're a very good little kiln. They're designed by a professor from the University of Utah State, John Neely. I fire 55 hours and I burn about 3.5 cords of wood. But the biggest advantage is that it fires easily and it doesn't smoke. And in a neighborhood like where I live, I can't have a smoking kiln. The neighbors would not like that at all. The only thing that really affects this kiln, what bothers it during the later part of the firing, or even in the early part of the firing, if we have a lot of high wind, then the wind pressure is pushing down the stack, and the flame it's a more difficult time in getting the kiln to draw correctly, and to start moving the heat to the back of the kiln. And sometimes we do get into those situations, but not very often. You never know with these wood fire kilns. You got idea, but you never know till you open them.
This kiln, as you will see, we build a fire and the flames are just running from one place to another. So it's just like a big river of flame and it's picking up ash and all sorts of stuff that's from the wood, and it's just carrying it through that kiln.
Tom?
Yeah.
You should bring some of your T-bowls because your T-bowls will look nice here behind a little bit. They'll get a good amount of ash, good crystal formation.
When you wood fire something, when you do that, one of the reasons that you do that is to indicate the history of how these things were made and fired and conceived of to begin with.
Sometimes if pots are close, you get beautiful coloration where those 2 pots were close. And then you get some beautiful color.
The thing is you have to have it open enough so that the flame will move through it. The reason we're firing these pieces up at this kill is because this is a very gentle kill. And my Anagama is a very, it's just like a huge afterburner. It's just, that's just the way it is. But the flame in this kill is very gentle and it's very easy. It's just kind of like a warm zephyr in the summer, just softly blowing against you. And whereas my Anagama is just like being in a storm.
You have anagamis, you have salt kilns, you have soda kilns, all these things. We know that once you put a pot in there, we're looking for the greatest fruition of an image we have in our heads and with this material, right? And so a guy like Frank Boyden knows that he's in a range, that if he fires it after all this experience in a certain way, something wonderful is going to happen.
This area right here on this piece would be fired facing the back of the kill, and this side over here, the back side here, would face the firebox. And so that all the back of this thing then would end up with maybe blues and running crystal and ash and whatnot. And this area, these owls would then just kind of emerge out of that into a sort of a golden lustered surface.
You can't just put a pot into a kiln and expect it to come out beautiful.
Okay, where's your pot, Frank?
Now we got the game going.
Now you have fire and heat and time and those things working all at once without you. You're a slave to it, but it's out of your hands.
You go through hundreds of hours to get to a point where you then subject it to a final out of control sort of situation. So it's a very bizarre, stupid way to work.
I guess that's part of this process, and it's probably part of the process that keeps many people from doing it because they can't abandon the tendency to want to control everything.
It's controlled uncontrolled, that's what I like now.
A potter needs to be a technician, somebody who works with clay, because it's anything that goes through stage after stage after stage, and you have to set that up at the very beginning to make it come out in the end after 4 or 5 transformations, for instance. There's a lot of control there. Any time that you can get beyond the technical kinds of things, then you can go off somewhere else.
If you define success as being able to consistently execute your ideas in ways that you can prefigure, then that's nice. It's not that it's easy, but it's certainly more convenient than getting your work out of a kiln and finding them completely transformed in ways that you never imagined, and then having to decide whether it's appropriate, whether you've done something well, because you're collaborating with forces, non-human forces, that have a lot more to do with weather and geology than with human interaction.
Well, at 4 o'clock, it was pitch black out here.
I was firing, and all of a sudden, it went. It is soft kind of gaboom, and it went completely dark.
And so we had to use flashlights to get the wood. Right now, what we're having to do is we're continually adjusting, even though if there was no wind, we probably wouldn't have to adjust so much as we are now, just opening and closing the dampers, just because the wind.
There's always, almost every firing, there's some little surprise of something, and it makes you very resourceful, and you solve a problem, and
that's what it does.
It's a big storm.
I wonder what's
Well, the lights
happening up.
I heard Portland just got pounded.
Oh, really? Portland too?
Kind of dark over
of a sudden, or was I faint?
You know, it's starting to rain.
I jumped to here because I knew we were going to use it.
People who do this kind of work, and I think this is something we all have in common,
This is pretty damp here.
are in a way like peasants. I mean, we work, we cut wood, we split wood. There's an element of definite physical labour involved. The actual firing of the kilns are very intensive labour effort. It's hot and it's smoky and it's unpleasant. So we're capable of basic physical work, but we're also capable of thinking about the aesthetic of what we're doing. And I mean, I guess everybody wonders why they're there. That's why religions come about. We don't come to religious answers, we come to aesthetic answers, I think.
No, we've gone through every damn aspect of the fire you can now. With the wind blowing, now we need a hurricane with the monsoon.
And you got the huge barometric chain.
Yeah.
You know, you got all kinds of cock-out taking place. You got wet wood, dry wood. I mean, look at this wind. I've never fired the 100-mile-an-hour wind.
The drama of the firing. Will it work? Will it not work? The amount of effort that goes into it with all these people and 3 cords of wood. What happens to all those dreams when they melt to the bottom of the kiln?
The problem with this porcelain, you know, it's so damn glass-like that if it goes just the slightest bit over, it'll start to slump and lose its shape and everything else.
Like in firebox. Clock has just got bad juju going tonight. I mean, my whole world just tumbled tonight.
Has it now?
Much like our pots, just they've tumbled. Crispy critters. What's that? Crispy critter pot.
Right. You know, we're sitting there telling all sorts of weird stories and, you know, and crazy things, but, you know, to some extent, you know, I think that a lot of that is just buffering the potential of disaster.
I don't know, man. I can't see any cones in there.
That kiln, you open that kiln every time and it's the same, I wouldn't even open it. You know, if you had such control that everything was always all right. We were talking about failure, because nothing is ever all right. I don't care. You'll get 99.9%, and there'll be that one that's not all right, and you can accept it. But, you know, if you didn't have those mistakes, it just wouldn't even be exciting. Sometimes they're not mistakes. Sometimes it's an advance, and you're not ready to accept it. The advance is just as scary as the failure.
Here's a bizarre dilemma that wood fire potters face. It's like when to stop. You know, it looks, say, hey, oh, let's give it up. We're tired. We think we have it.
The long cooling of these kilns, you know, accomplishes several things, but you know, it just, you know, the work cools very slowly. There's really a lot of porcelain in here, big pieces, and there's points in which, you know, those clays can crack and, you know, as they cool down and whatnot. So when you go really slow like that, it pretty well takes care of any of those problems. But also, there's a lot of little pieces of ash that end up on the outside of the pieces, and those, they form like it's just a sort of a little nucleus there, and then there's a crystalline growth that happens.
It's like Christmas when you open that kiln, it's full of gifts.
That pot back there is a winner.
Yeah,
If it's not screwed up, it's beautiful. Crack your touchstone.
And mysteries that suddenly, you know, you turn a pot round and there's something completely different on the other side. It's exciting.
Well, what do you think, Cal?
Well, if there were a bridge, I'd jump off her. Thank God I'm not close to a bridge.
except the one in my mouth.
And I threw all the, I got that little one here. You know, and I'd, if there were a rope, lucky I don't have ropes around, we'd have a 3-person hanging.
Well, hanging. Why? No,
this.
I think we got one good piece.
There's going to be some beautiful things in there, man.
Maybe 1 or 2, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I would say, well, many firings, it begins with, oh no, this is going to be terrible. They'll crack open the kiln, and the grumbling begins. Oh no, we've over-oxidized it, we've over this, we've done that, it's too hot, too cold, and everything is a disaster. And then slowly and surely as the thing unfolds, you know, there's one more masterpiece comes out.
Jenny?
Oh my God.
You owe me.
You owe me. Yay.
Look at those crystals.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Or Jenny.
Look at this. Look at this.
Oh, yeah. This is
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Look at that.
Look at that deep.
That's
Yeah.
It really
And
is.
the crystals. Here are the crystals.
That's
I love.
Every piece in here, in this kiln, has a signature of wood fire. You know, and we all have things which we would like to see happen.
You see the iridescence on that pearlescence, that's beautiful.
You know, a real richness, a real lusciousness. And sometimes you get that, and sometimes you don't.
Oh man, look at
Look
that.
at this drip here.
Let me see that. Is that a squirter?
Go.
Look at that. Yeah, here's a squirter, man.
That's beautiful though. Get into that.
Yeah, this is as good as it gets, man.
I'm just trying to
beauty.
keep it from bumping.
Look at that.
Iron. I'm just want you to bump this.
That is beautiful, Frank.
In pottery, like anything else, there are places where skill gives you a safe area to thrive in. You know, it's safety. There's a safe area. If I do it this way all the time, it'll be safe. It'll be a quite high quality because I've got skill. And some people spend their whole lives doing that. I mean, they'll work about that for their whole ceramic career, or you know, their lives maybe. But there's a difference. The difference between that kind of thing and 2 guys conspiring to do this event. The time that it took them to do that was all risk. It was all risk. It was about risk.
The risks are enormous. In the early stages, sometimes there'd be 1 or 2 pieces out of several hundred that just seemed to have some kind of vitality, just enough to keep you from abandoning the whole thing and wanting to do it again as soon as you could.
And we do it again and again and again and again and again. And you know, sometimes it's fantastic, sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
If you have the character that says, that's worth doing, and I don't care what anybody says, I believe in myself, and I'm going to go do this. Well, a lot of people in life don't have that kind of thinking. Everything is regimented, and if a risk comes up, it's a little more frightening to take because there's ramifications.
The idea of failure is absolutely essential in anything that's really good. If there's not failure, there's no possibility to really soar somewhere.
My view is that people who are seriously working at art in any form are taking a risk, because art always involves going into unknown ground, and it's unknown. You don't know what you're going to find there.